And so to me, I believe it was definitely a God thing that these things all came to be. But as I started doing more and more with creating lots of different programs and facilitating a lot of different programs, I taught
hmm
everything, farming equipment. Like I taught about so many different things, but the
hmm
ones that really resonated so deeply with me were all of the leadership development. Back then we called them soft skills, right? But
hmm
all the things about how people connect and relate and communicate and all of those things. And so I realized I really wanted to be more of a trainer and a facilitator. And I loved also the strategy and the curriculum architecture and all of that, because
hmm
that's my number one strength is strategy, and
hmm
engagement is up there as well. But I just love being in front of people.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Wynn, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host Rajan, and today's guest is Carla Taylor, an executive leadership and career coach, keynote speaker, and co-author of Career Happiness in the Age of AI. With more than 25 years of experience guiding leaders and organizations through transformation, Carla specializes in helping people align their strengths, navigate change with confidence, and design careers and cultures that are both future ready and deeply fulfilling. As the founder of Bring Your Brilliance and a #1 international best-selling author, Carla has developed innovative coaching frameworks that empower professionals to discover their true value, unlock their brilliance, and thrive in today's rapidly shifting world of work. And it's a pleasure for me to have her on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Carla.
Thank you so very much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for coming, Carla. I wanted to talk to you about when it comes to your coaching business and your beginnings. First of all, how long has it been since you actually started coaching? And then when thinking about business itself, I think it's been almost 7 years, but have you been coaching before that? How did it start and what inspired you to do this?
Well, yeah, that's such a great question. So for me, I actually started my entire journey wanting to just learn. I've always been an avid learner. I've always been very future focused, but I also didn't know what I wanted to do because I had a lot of different options and possibilities of what I could possibly do. So even in college, way back in college, I took way more credits than you're even supposed to in a semester. Like you're supposed to do 12 to 18, and I always did 20 to 21 because I just wanted to learn as much as I could and try to figure out my own career path.
Mhm.
And I couldn't quite figure it out because nothing was standing out to me. And so much of what I've learned along the way is what I was seeking for myself first, which I think happens for a lot of people, of course. But I also grew up living internationally. And so I've already had such a wide variety of experiences in my life, even back when I was still in college. But since then, I've done so many things and so many different things in my own career. Again, it was more of a, let me try this, let me try that, and the 20s really are for exploration, which is a great thing to be doing. I explored, I did a lot of different things.
Mhm.
In a lot of different ways. And so back then it was actually a really bad thing to have a lot of career moves because it's like, oh, you're not loyal, you're not consistent, whatever. And now it's like, well, why are you being stagnant, staying in the same place for so long? So finally the world caught up with me.
Interesting.
And looking for people who had a lot of diverse experiences and things. But no, it was just part of it was me seeking. But as far as becoming a coach itself, so I started down this path of trying to figure out different things. And I just, found one job because it was at a language school that I had actually taken Japanese from when we moved to Japan. And so I was like, oh, this is a great organization. I ended up working for them at first as an English instructor. And then I ran the whole front desk and all of that. And then I ended up leading all the intercultural programs. So that was really fun and awesome. Every job I was taking, I kept being like, wow, like this needs to be better for people to learn the job itself. And I started just like creating manuals or ways to train myself and then whoever came after me. So I was naturally drawn to that for sure. I didn't even know that there was a degree in that, which is actually called
Mhm.
instructional design. And even how I ended up getting a master's degree in instructional design. But again, it wasn't something I knew about. It literally was, I was getting ready to get engaged. My
Mhm.
not yet fiance at the time, we were talking about moving to Indianapolis. We were down in Atlanta, and my cousin had just interviewed in IT, which is what my boyfriend at the time was in. So we were trying to find her and ask her, hey, who should he talk to in Indianapolis if he wants to start interviewing? Well, this was before cell phones. And so we tracked her down at her mom's house, my aunt. And so I was telling her what we were looking for, what my questions were. And I said, well, my plan is to go move in with my parents, save some money for a year or two, get a master's degree, and go from there. And she's like, hang on a second. My mom wants to ask you a question. So my aunt gets on the phone. This is a Sunday night. I remember very distinctly. We got off the phone at 10 p.m. But she was like, how would you like to come to Iowa and live with us for free and get your master's degree for free? And I was like, well, I haven't even taken the GRE. Like, I was just gathering information. I wasn't prepared to start anything yet. And basically they were like, well, your uncle is a professor. He has a graduateship open. It would actually be free for you. It'll pay you a monthly stipend. You can do it in a year and it starts in a week. Well, I haven't even taken the GRE. I haven't done any of these things. They're like, well, we know the dean. We could probably get that waived. And I'm like, well, I'd at least have to give 2 weeks notice at work. And they were like, well, you could probably start a week late. We could probably get that sorted out for you. So I did the next morning, Monday morning. I was giving my 2 weeks notice and I was upheaving my entire life to go after this incredible opportunity that really fell in my lap. And the degree that I didn't even know what I wanted. I knew I liked writing, but I didn't know training. There was a degree in anything in the training or adult education world. That was the degree. That was what my uncle was a professor in that area. And so she's like, I think he might like it. And it was perfect. It was exactly what I didn't know I was looking for. And so that started me on this path then of working with training, learning and development, leadership development, organizational development, all of those things that I've always been interested in. I actually had figured that much out in my undergrad that I really was fascinated by how people work better together. Management was my minor there. It was something I was already interested in. But again, I didn't know that path or that degree even existed. And so to me, I believe it was definitely a God thing that these things all came to be. But as I started doing more and more with creating lots of different programs and facilitating a lot of different programs, I taught everything, farming equipment. Like I taught about so many different things, but the ones that really resonated so deeply with me were all of the leadership development. Back then we called them soft skills, right? But all the things about how people connect and relate and communicate and all of those things. And so I realized I really wanted to be more of a trainer and a facilitator. And I loved also the strategy and the curriculum architecture and all of that, because that's my number one strength is strategy, and ideation is up there as well. But I just love being in front of people and talking with people as well. And that's the other thing. I took a speech class in college and I was terrified. I hated it. I was like, I will never do that again. And my very first day coming into the master's degree program, starting a week late, like the very first thing, I haven't even met anybody yet. They're like, come on. And I just go with them and we go to this massive auditorium in front of this hundreds of students. And they're like, do this. Like, so I'm standing on a stage reading slides I've never seen. That was my thrown into the deep end introduction to that graduate assistant role. So obviously I had to get over my fear. Now I love it. I love being able to impact people in a lot of different ways, but being on a stage in front of people, which is so funny because I was so shy growing up. I never was brave enough to even talk to many people, and it's so fascinating how my life has taken so many, I'll never do that. And then here I am doing that.
I just wanted to ask, when you made the move, were you actually in Japan or was it?
No, so I had grown up. So Indianapolis my dad worked for Eli Lilly, and that's the world headquarters. And so he'd gotten into international business when I was pretty young. But then when I was like in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, we lived in Taipei, Taiwan. And my dad was working in Asia. And then we came back to Indianapolis for a few years. And then we went to Japan for my high school years. So I graduated from high school in Japan, but then I went to college at Indiana University. Then I moved down to Atlanta 5 days after I graduated. Again, a very spontaneous, let's just do this and figure it out. I didn't have a job lined up. I was just like, I want to go somewhere else. And after trying to get work, and back then your degree really mattered. And since I had taken so many different courses in undergrad, I ended up graduating with a general studies degree, but with a management minor, because I could either graduate in 3.5 years, which I ended up stretching out to 4, or it would have taken me an extra year to actually get a management major. And so I'm like, well, I'll just do it this way, get my degree, it'll be fine. But then I found back then it really wasn't fine, because people didn't take the general studies degree as seriously. And so I kept finding roles where I wasn't at the next level where I really should have been. And so I was like, I need to go get a master's degree if I want to be taken seriously. So I did that, but I went from Atlanta to Iowa. city to right out in the country. That's from where my aunt and uncle lived. And then I moved to Indianapolis. So it was actually a good transition to get back to Indiana, because for me, the Midwest just didn't feel vibrant, exciting place like a lot of the other places I'd lived as well. But that's where I ended up raising my children. And so it's all as it was meant to be, I'm sure. I got into the training and in learning and development world, created all sorts of different trainings and things, loved working with people, but I was still doing it either at like the organizational change management level, employee engagement, things like that. I was doing it at the team level. I wasn't doing much of the one-on-one coaching at that time. And so, well, I ended up having triplets. That was a step out of my career moment for sure.
Wow.
And so I myself was working for Eli Lilly at the time. And so I stayed home for the first few years of having my kids. And then I actually ended up going through a divorce. And so I needed to figure out what was next. And it was 2009. So I don't know if you recall, it was like this huge recession and nobody was hiring. And I was trying to get work at that point. I'd get like the top one or two candidates that I'd get all the way through the interviews. And then they'd be like, oh, we actually can't hire for that position at all right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is awful. And so someone said to me at that point, I had a master's degree. They're like, especially with a master's degree, it could take you 12 to 18 months at this point to find a role. So why not spend that time building your own business? And I was like, oh, I've never done that before. It was really scary, but I did. And again, I just kind of jumped into it and figured it out along the way. A lot of things I'd obviously do differently now, but that was in 2009. And so at that time, I'd done a lot of really cool training and even gotten some certifications and things when I was at Lilly. And so I created a program called Ignite Your Strengths. And my first company was called Ignite Consulting. And I was mostly doing these team workshops and series of workshops on DISC communication styles and Strengths Finder combined. And it was a really powerful program for teams to really learn a lot about themselves. And those who did the full program, it was a year-long program, really massively transformed. And it was so amazing, all the things you learn about in Strengths Finder and strengths-based approach. But a lot of people will just do the one workshop, or they'll just take the assessment and not do a lot with it. But when you actually put it in the work and shift things across your team and even across the organization, I had a couple organizations who actually allowed me to teach all of the teams. At one point, we had them all in the same room. And it was, I don't know how many people, but it was so cool because not only could the team itself figure out what they would need to do with strengths across the team, but then the teams across the organizations could say, well, this team's really good at influencing and this team's really good at accounting or, whatever. And so they could figure out ways to leverage across the entire organization. It was so cool. And so people who actually do that, I got to see them pretty good. They started out here, there's this team of people, right? And then it was like they just soared and went to this massive new level individually, but also as a team. And even like the team itself started winning all these awards. And it was just really, really amazing to see what happens when people put it into practice. I never could understand people who are like fangirls or whatever that are like all about celebrities. And especially because I grew up meeting even celebrities, but a lot of really, big important people and stuff. So I've always just been like, I'm comfortable with anybody, like from the top person to the lowest. I can relate to anybody wherever they are. And I always was like, oh, celebrities are cool, but they're just people still, But the one person that I have always been like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. Everything I've ever done has been based on his work is Marcus Buckingham, who of course used to be with Gallup and then created his own company as well. But he's all about strengths, and Love Plus Work is his newest book, and like everything he does. And I had his video. And so in my Ignite Your Strengths class, I would play that first video from Trombone Player Wanted, which is, was one of his first video series. And so I'd see him, talking every time I taught, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions. And so I was always just like, oh my gosh, he's so amazing. And so after I started my own company, that's when I got a coaching certification as well. And at that point, I actually made the decision. That was when ICF was pretty new, International Coaching Federation. And because I'd already paid for a master's degree and had so many years, 15 years of experience at this point, I didn't feel like I needed to spend a huge amount of money for something. I didn't know if it was actually going to ever be super legit at that time. So I chose not to go down that path. And I now probably would have done that differently, because especially if you want to be doing coaching in corporate worlds, they often will only allow people who've had the ICF certification. And so that being a deal breaker for me. But what I found is if I don't actually call myself a coach and I come in more as a consultant, then they'll still hire. But if I had to do it over again, I probably would have gone ahead with the ICF at that point. But at this point, I've coached hundreds of people. I've taught so many classes. I've worked with so many organizations. I don't feel the need to go back and try to do that too, because I found different entry points and different ways to still help people. But what was so cool about when I finally got my coaching certification, that's when I started working with individuals. And it was amazing to me that, you can influence the entire organization with some of these big things. And that's incredible to be able to do. And you can really help teams come better together and everything else. But the deep transformation and the speed of transformation happens at the individual level. And so I actually found I loved all three. And so for years I struggled with, okay, should I go after the big organizational things? Should I go after the team? Should I go after the individuals? And every time I was like, okay, I'm just going to choose one and stay here. It didn't feel like enough for me. I felt like, but they've got all these other skills I'm not using that I want to be in contribution to. And so that was actually one of my own learnings about my own career. And one of the reasons why the people I help the most, usually they're mid-career and usually they have like a multi-potentialite, multifaceted kind of, like they could do a lot of different things. And they've been stuck in this world where people say, well, you just have to choose one. The rest of that sentence is you have to choose one at a time. And one of the people I've loved along the way also is Barbara Scher. And she was a very well-known career coach back in like the 80s and 90s, I think. She used to have a show on PBS and do all sorts of things. But she wrote a book, I Can Do Anything If Only I Knew What It Was. She wrote a book called Wishcraft and several other job-related books. And one of her terms was a scanner. And a scanner is that multi-potentialite, that multifaceted person who, some people even would put the ADHD people in that thing, although she actually differentiates between the two. But they're the ones who are constantly looking at different things, and part of what makes them thrive is variety. That's definitely who I am. And so being able to balance, okay, I'm going to do this much with teams, this much with organizations, this much with individuals, rather than trying to just stay in one, is where I thrive and what I love to do and how I can really show up in a lot of different ways and help people at different levels. And so I also help people who are like me, who are trying to figure out what do I want to do and how can I put it together, and have been told their whole lives, well, you're doing it wrong. No, we're doing it the way it works for us. And there's different tools that we need that maybe other people don't, because they can just pick one and stay in one lane, never vary from it. So I really found I'm so good at all three of those levels because I have such a visionary strategy, vision. I can see as soon as I meet someone, whether it's a person, a team, or an organization, I can see them at their fullest potential. I can see exactly where they could go and how they could be at their best. It just is almost instant for me. That has made me really good at all three of those levels. But especially with the one-on-one, I can really come along somebody and help them through whatever it is that they're feeling challenged with. And everybody in every life has challenges as well as successes along the way. Nobody has a problem-free life. So you end up, whether you call yourself a leadership coach or a career coach or whatever other type of coach, you end up coaching their whole life, really, because everything is connected and everything is related. And so by being able to come in alongside and kind of walk people through that phase of their life, that has also been some of the most rewarding work for me, and being able to see them, especially, and for a while I did a lot of outplacement career coaching. So especially there, I was sometimes even in the room as they were getting fired, which I would not recommend putting the outplacement coach in that room because then they associate you with that negative event. However, some organizations did that anyway. But when I meet them, usually on the day they got fired, they were devastated and they were in such breakdown that they couldn't even, I knew they weren't going to remember anything. With me on that first meeting. But I also knew my job today is to let you know you're going to be okay. And I'm going to be here when you're ready. Let's not start next week. Take a week or 2 or 3 even to breathe, to rest, to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. When you are at a place emotionally that you're ready to get started, I'll be here. And I knew even when some of those first meetings were so hard, I also had this joy because I knew that they were going to end up not only finding their way from there, but every single time I'd see people who would have never left that job or, whatever different reasons. And every single one of them, at least that worked with me, ended up in a much better place than where they'd been. So I knew they were going to go somewhere so much better that I'd get so excited for them. Even in that first day, I had one person ever who walked into that room after immediately being fired. And she was like, I'm free. She was so excited. And she had been feeling stuck because she cared so much about her teammates and the people that she was working with, but she hated the job and she'd been wanting it for years. And she felt so relieved when she got fired and didn't have to be the one to quit.
Yeah.
She was the only person I've seen come in with that much joy. at that moment.
What about like thinking about your journey, and it's exciting to see how many shifts you've done throughout your life. It's like
Yeah.
amazing.
There's actually
What
way more
is
than I've even mentioned, but yes, I am the queen of resilience and reinvention for sure.
where is it going next? So like thinking about the future for the next 1 to 3 years,
Yes.
are you now working towards some specific goals with your
Absolutely,
coaching
yes.
business?
I really have taken a lot of different paths. So I did all the training and development stuff. And then I started working as a leadership consultant for a hospital, but I was under HR. And the HR people I was working for had no vision. They were all about compliance and finding people doing things wrong. And a couple of them didn't even believe in leadership development. And why are you even here? And it was just so hard to be in that
Mhm.
stunted place. And I was at an HR conference. And it was a great conference. It was in Indianapolis, but it was like the leaders of that conference were more visionary, but most of the attendees weren't.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you've heard of Seth Godin, but
Yeah.
Seth Godin was a speaker there. And he was begging people. He was like, Indiana, you are flying too low. You have to look up. You have to like see what's coming. You have to like be more future focused and ready to do new things. And most people in that room, and he even said, the majority of you aren't even going to understand what I'm saying. They didn't. He's like, but I know there's just a couple of you in this room. And I'm like, me, who get it, you know? And even at his book signing afterwards, most of those people had never heard of him. They didn't know who he was. And,
Mhm.
you know, those of us, I think there was like literally, I think there was maybe 20 people in line for his book signing. And this was a conference of like 3,000 or more. There were really only a handful of us who understood anything about who he was. But that was a defining moment for me that I was like, why am I in this room full of people who are nothing like me?
Mhm.
You know, and I at the time had met this woman who had a tech startup, and she's like, hey, I have a free ticket if you want to join me at Collision, which was this really wonderful conference for startups and people in the tech world. That was a wonderful blend of everything from, they had celebrities, they had big tech people, they had the whole exhibit floor was people who had raised at least 100,000 if not a million for their startup. And so these are like the movers and the shakers and the people who are doing big things in big ways. And so while I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, it was night and day energy and difference between the HR slow, sad conference. And not that it was sad. I mean, there was amazing people there. It just didn't
Yeah.
feel like my fit. And so I just realized I want to be in this more vibrant world. And so I was like, what could I do? I'm not a tech person. That's not my background. But
Mhm.
I ended up having this vision of creating on-demand co-working as a platform. And so I did that for 2 years. I had several spaces in Indianapolis and Chicago. And as fate would have it, my investor and I both realized things weren't quite taking off. He actually didn't know that much about tech either. We realized we were spending too much money. We needed somebody who was a tech expert on our team. And we could have either like doubled down. And the other thing that was a moment for me in that decision was I went out to California, and in the same day I went to the redwood forest in the morning for the first time seeing the redwoods. And they actually had this big tree, and it was about innovation. And they actually had a steam engine train where they talked about like the technology for that. And they actually shared the story that Tesla was this huge inventor, but nobody really knew his name because other people had stolen the credit for it. And that's why Elon Musk named his company Tesla, because he wanted his name to be honored for the technology advances that he brought to the world. But this timeline of this tree, it was like nothing for however many, you know, hundreds or thousands of years. It's not thousands, but however long the tree had been alive up to that point. And then the first invention was the printing press. And then it was going, so there was like shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter times between the next inventions till we got to more of the current. And then it was like constant, right? So it was really, really nothing to slow to faster to like constant change. So that was something I'm thinking about. And then I go to Google, Facebook, and Apple all in the same afternoon because they're all really close to each other. So I spent a couple hours at each after being in the redwood forest in the morning. And so I'm there, you know, I have a tech startup at the time, and I'm like, this is the epitome of success where, you know, I can take my tech startup to and And I was like, wait a second. I stepped out of HR and big companies and big business to be where the vibrant movers and shakers are and where there's all this energy. And my goal is to create a corporation. And it was like, I want to be in the redwood forest. This isn't what I actually want to be my end goal. I want to have a lifestyle business where I can actually do it from anywhere. I can go different places. I'm not building this huge company. That's not me. And so that was part of what had happened right before I came back from that. And my investor and I sat down and said, okay, let's not do this anymore. Right after that, COVID hit. So thank God we weren't trying to do a co-working business during
Yeah.
COVID. And so at that point, again, I have to completely reinvent myself. I had stepped away from all the learning and development stuff that I was doing, even though I actually was doing some trainings within the co-working space. But I said, okay, I just did all this big stuff, doing all these different moving parts, all these different things, having to hire different people for different things. What can I do that's just me right now to just like breathe for a moment? So I started dialing into LinkedIn. And I'd been on LinkedIn since probably the very beginning. And I had started to see it way back at the beginning. It was really just an online resume. There wasn't a whole lot going on as far as community or anything else. Yeah. And then I saw people starting to bring a lot more content and the content creators. And there was just a few of them at the very beginning. And a lot of people were like, this is not that kind of platform, and really tried to shut them down. And they're like, no, we think there's more available here. I saw one of the first viral, things on LinkedIn, and we're like, you can go viral on LinkedIn. Like that just was kind of unheard of back then. And so I'd always been a fan of the platform, and I realized I actually know quite a bit. I've seen a lot of things. I've connected with a lot of these thought leaders. So I'm going to just help people with their LinkedIn. I can do that, just me. I can coach people with their careers and LinkedIn and things like that. And so that's what I started doing for about 1.5 to 2 years, I think. So I did that. And then COVID happened while I was doing that. And I had just posted as my cover photo on my LinkedIn this question that said, aren't you tired of playing small? And it was meant for my clients and my prospects. And I see that every day as I'm going out there for 2 weeks. And then I'm like, wait a second, that question was for me. And that was right after my dad had died. He was this incredible international business leader, and he had this huge leadership legacy and mentoring. He actually had mentored the man who's now the president of Elanco, which is the animal health division of Lilly at the time. And that man started a mentoring company in Indianapolis, which has now gone national. And he'd been mentored directly by my dad. And so I felt like even that was part of my dad's legacy. And then all these people are freaking out during COVID saying, oh my gosh, how do we work remotely? How do we connect people that are across the world? How can we possibly? And I'm like, I know all these answers. This is what we've been doing in employee engagement. This is stuff that I've been working on. We used to call it telecommuting instead of remote work, but it was stuff that I'd already done a lot of. I realized I'd already been building out a bunch of solutions over the years too. And I realized I was actually building a system, and it was all the answers of what people needed. And I was playing way too small by only focusing on individuals one-on-one on LinkedIn things. And so I decided, okay, it's time for me to get bigger again. That's when I started I'd already been doing the podcast called Bring Your Brilliance. And that was about showcasing other people's brilliance. I'd already done a lot of the career coaching and outplacement coaching at the time. And I'd meet all these people in corporate who wanted to do something else. They wanted to go start their own business or do whatever else, but they were terrified. They're like, I can't, like, how can I wouldn't have benefits. I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have that. I don't even know what to do. And I've always been looking about 10 years or more ahead for some reason. I don't know. That's just how I'm wired. And I had seen before COVID, everybody was already predicting there was going to be this mass exodus of like the baby boomers and everything else, that there was going to be a lot fewer but bigger corporations. And then people were going to start doing the gig economy and all these different things, that the whole entire workforce was shifting. And that's actually why I started the co-working thing, was because I was like, man, there's going to be a lot of people falling through the cracks. And here I am helping these incredible professionals that had their company pay for outplacement. But what about all these other people who don't get outplacement coaching? They're going to need help. They're going to need to figure out where to go. How do we catch them as they fall? Where are they going to go if they don't know where to go? And I looked ahead to I looked out at India and some other countries that were ahead of the US as far as having gone through massive economic shifts. And their co-working spaces were thriving. And that's where everybody would go to get the pulse of the economy of the community and, all of that stuff. And I was like, that's where people are going to go, is these co-working spaces. That's where we can catch them. So yes, my vehicle was connecting people to co-working spaces, but my ultimate goal was to actually connect people, teach them how to collaborate, and help them figure out their next steps. So it was like a career coaching version of that. Was my ultimate goal, was to actually give them what they needed so that they could get to their next step. And so now, as I tell you all of this, everything had this theme. But at the time I was like, why am I doing this and then this and then this? And I was going in so many different directions. And yet everything had this theme of helping people bring their brilliance. And when I started my podcast, I was always the person behind the scenes. I was always like, you go out and do these amazing things. You go out and do those amazing things. And they would, and they'd thrive, and they'd have these amazing lives. But I was the behind the scenes person. And when I started doing my podcast, I worked with a graphic designer. And I was like, I really feel like I need a new name for my business at this point, everything else. He's like, well, why don't you call it Bring Your Brilliance? And he wanted to do a branding of my face, even for my podcast, next to the words Bring Your Brilliance. I'm like, I can't call myself brilliant. I can't. He's like, why not? Like, I teach everybody else to own their brilliance and be able to talk about their significant strengths and contributions and things like that. And then I was afraid to do it myself, That was when I made that shift and started putting myself out there and putting myself out front and realizing how scary it really was, and like admiring my clients even more and understanding them so much more. You just got to get out there and do it. Done is better than perfect, and don't be afraid. And I actually was at a conference, and I'm going to say a swear word, so you might want to bleep it out if you need to, but there was a man who'd come from a corporate, he worked at IBM, and he started doing a lot of social media stuff and things like that. And he was like, just do the damn thing, push the damn button. He had a hat that said that. Yeah. He's like, just do it, because you're going to learn more every time you do it. So everybody's going to start with that first pancake. Everybody's going to have that messy beginning. That's okay. That's where you're going to learn. That's where you're going to grow. That's got to take action in order to action. So I did. And I ended up growing my LinkedIn to over 11,000 people and doing a lot on there. But yeah, I've always been my own guinea pig. Even when I was teaching other people to do it, I'd done a lot of the other things, but I just hadn't done the put myself out front part. And now I've done that too.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. Sorry about that. You've actually answered quite a few of my questions already. So I really appreciate that. If there's any advice within the last minute that we can give to coaches who are listening, who want to scale their impact, is there anything else you'd like to add?
So as I was doing all of those things, as I had that big aha moment about I was playing too small and calling my company Then Bring Your Brilliance, I had also basically been gifted this entire career development program. It was actually from the man who had run the entire career development program for Eli Lilly, which is a huge global company, for 28 years. And he didn't know that I had worked at Lilly. He didn't know that my dad had worked at Lilly, but he was in Indianapolis and he was retiring. And Lilly was actually, it was one of the most highly benchmarked, like just this phenomenal program. Most of those people have spent their entire careers there. So all these incredible business people having incredible success in their careers. But for some reason, when he was retiring, Lilly decided to throw that whole program out and just get some new brand line, new online one. And this man, his name is John Weiss, he was so heartbroken. He's like, this is my legacy. Why are they getting rid of it? It can't die with me. And so he went out to the Indianapolis community, found a handful of career coaches, which is what I was doing at that time. And so he said, take it, make it your own, do whatever you want with it. Just don't let it die with me. And so I created that into first a program and then a book called the Career Happiness Project. And I actually wrote it while I was running the Outplacement Career Center in Cincinnati at OmniSource. I was staying there during the week. And I'd always said if I could have a week or two in a hotel room, I would write a book. Well, I had almost 9 months of being every week at this hotel room, which is also, I think, how I survived my triplets being 13 that year. That was a tough year, let me tell you. But I wrote the book and I actually got to use all my content and exercises with these outplacement clients initially to do some testing of it. But I started using that as my career coaching program for several years. And then I finally published the book. And so I published that in I don't know what year it was, but pretty recently, 2023 maybe. And 2 weeks to the day after I published it, I happened to be at another HR conference. This time, somebody had invited me to come with them, and I didn't even know Marcus Buckingham was the speaker. And so I got to meet him in person. I got a picture with him. I actually signed my book to him as he was signing his book to me. Got a picture with him holding my book, and I was so excited. That was my whole fangirl thing. I was like, I finally understood. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this might be like my most exciting day ever. He's like, really? But it was such an incredible moment for me. And so because I actually had that book in my hand, I walk into a co-working space, and there's so many themes in my life too. And this woman who I'd known when she worked at Lilly, crazy patterns here, said, oh my gosh, you need to meet this professor. He's looking for somebody who's got career development. Is that your book? And I said, yes. So she connected me with Professor Fozzie. And he's the one that I'm now creating this college textbook and curriculum called Career Happiness in the Age of AI. So what's next is we're creating this college curriculum. It's incredible as far as his life's work. For more than 25 years, he's been studying AI, and he's one of the top AI experts in the world, like before anybody else had even really heard of it. And he has really honed in on the 3 areas of human skills that are ever more going to be needed in our AI world. And so we're teaching people how to focus on and align with and develop their careers, keeping those 3 areas of the human skills in mind, as well as how to navigate, how to, what do you need to think about when you're putting out your resume and doing your LinkedIn, and what are the applicant tracking systems looking for? What are the different AIs seeing across the platforms, as well as the people and what you need to be doing. And so it's a really solid, powerful book. We're actually working with a publisher now. It should be out by the end of this year, I think, maybe even a little bit sooner. And I'm already teaching some workshops on that. So I have a workshop coming up next week, actually, which is specifically geared towards learning and development professionals and how they're actually MVPs of the superpowers of what we are needing in the age of AI, the new AI era.
What I'm thinking is we can actually continue this conversation further because I have a couple more questions to ask you. But right now, I'm going to have to jump off. I just got one other guest that is waiting. So I was thinking, how about we continue? I'm going to keep this recording and then we're going to merge it with another one. So what you can do is book another session with me. I'm going to send you the link over email and then we can continue the rest of the conversation. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just wanted to.
I know I
because
talk
someone
a lot.
else is waiting.
I understand.
So thank you, and we'll continue the rest of it on the second part of it. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.